All right, let's dive into something fascinating. We're talking about a diplomatic showdown where what actually happened might be less important than the story each side wants you to believe. It's a high-stakes game of perception, right? And we're going to unpack why both the US and Canada are so desperate for you to buy their version of events. Seriously, this is like a masterclass in modern power politics. So, it all boils down to this one question. What really happened on that phone call between Donald Trump and Mark Carney? I mean, think about it. You've got one phone call, two leaders, and somehow two completely different stories emerge. How does that even happen? How does a single conversation turn into this huge international he said, she said? And maybe more importantly, what does this whole PR battle actually mean for the rest of us? Okay, so here's Washington's side of the story. This came out like right after the call, from U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Fox News. The quote is that Carney was very aggressively walking back some of the unfortunate remarks he made at Davos. The message here? It's crystal clear. They're painting a picture where the Canadian leader stepped out of line, got a firm phone call from the U.S. president, and was basically put back in his place. It's a story all about restoring American dominance.
But then, just hours later, you get Canada's response, a total counterpunch. Mark Carney comes out and says, "To be absolutely clear, I meant what I said in Davos." Bam! It's a direct, public takedown of Washington's story. It just blows a huge hole in their narrative. And just like that, the perception war was officially on.
All right, so this gets us to the next big question. What were these so-called unfortunate remarks that caused this whole international mess? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we've got to rewind a week. We're heading to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. This is where Canada decided to, publicly redefine its entire role on the world stage.
And this timeline, it really tells the story, doesn't it? Look how fast this all happened. On January 20th, Carney gives that big speech in Davos. A week later, on the 27th, the phone call happens. And immediately, Bessent is on Fox News spinning Washington's version. But by the very next day, the 28th, Carney is in Ottawa publicly pushing back. It was a total whirlwind, showing just how fast both sides moved to get control of the story.
So here's the line from that speech that really lit the fuse. Carney said, "This is not sovereignty. It is the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination." Wow. What he's basically saying is that for countries like Canada, going one-on-one with a superpower like the US isn't a real partnership. He's calling it an act, a performance, where these countries pretend to be in charge but are actually just accepting that they're number two.
But here's the thing. Carney wasn't just complaining about the old system. Nope. He was actually announcing a whole new strategy for Canada. A strategy for real independence. And he did it on the world's biggest economic stage. He was basically declaring that Canada was going to forge its own path, separate from its very powerful neighbor.
And this wasn't just talk. This slide really shows you what that new strategy looks like in practice. I mean, look at this. 12 new trade and security deals across 4 continents in just 6 months. New partnerships with China and Qatar. They doubled their defense spending, and they even sided with Denmark over Greenland to counter U.S. plans. This is a very real, very carefully built web of relationships designed to give Canada a whole lot more options.
Okay, so you have this really bold speech, and then this diplomatic firestorm. So how did we get from one to the other? Let's break down the two totally different stories about that phone call.
And here it is, laid out side by side. On one hand, you have Washington's story. Carney's remarks were unfortunate, and he was aggressively walking back his comments. The message, America's in charge. Then you have Ottawa's story. Carney didn't back down one bit. He meant what I said and actually explained his new strategy to the president. The message there, Canadian independence is for real. I mean, these aren't just slightly different takes, they're polar opposites.
Yeah, according to Carney, he didn't apologize at all. He says the call wasn't about backing down, it was about doubling down. He claims he used that time to personally walk the U.S. president through the exact strategy he had just unveiled in Davos. It's a pretty bold move if that's what happened.
And he didn't just talk in hypotheticals. The number to remember here is 12. He apparently pointed to the 12 new international deals Canada had signed in just the last 6 months. It was like he was saying, see, this isn't just a plan. This is the new reality. This is how we operate now.
And he even supposedly got into the nitty-gritty of their new electric vehicle deal with China. Look at these details. A massive tariff cut for Canada, a vehicle cap to manage the flow, and, in return, China lowers tariffs on Canadian farm goods. He was framing this not as a threat, but as a really smart, strategic move to open up new markets, all while, staying within the lines of their North American trade obligations.
So let's zoom out for a second, because this is where it gets really important. This whole thing isn't just some squabble between neighbors. No, this perception war is much bigger than that. It's really about setting a precedent for the entire world. It's about defining the rules of the game for how other countries can or can't deal with the United States.
And it really all boils down to this one concept: hegemony. You know, the dominance of one state over all the others. Washington's version of the story, the one where Carney apologizes, that's a classic power play. It's meant to send a very clear message to every other country watching: don't even think about challenging us, because we will shut it down.
And that's why Washington has to win this perception war. Just think about it. If Canada, one of America's closest allies, can publicly go its own way and get praised for it on the world stage, well, that completely undermines America's leverage with everyone else. It weakens their hand in every single future negotiation.
So you can bet that other allies, countries like South Korea, Japan, nations all across Europe, they are watching this like a hawk. For them, this is a test case. They're asking themselves, can we actually chart our own course? Is it possible to be more independent without getting crushed?
So, who's telling the truth? How will we ever know for sure? Well, the ultimate test is coming. The next chapter of this story is about to be written, and it's all going to go down during the upcoming CUSMA review. And just a quick reminder for anyone who needs it, CUSMA is the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. It's the deal that replaced NAFTA. This thing is basically the economic engine for all of North America, the biggest free trade zone in the world. So yeah, this review, it's a really, really big deal.
And this is where the rubber meets the road. How Canada acts in these negotiations will tell us everything we need to know. If Washington's story was true, you'd expect Canada to be cautious, trying to keep the U.S. happy to protect their market access. But if Canada's story was true, they'll negotiate as if CUSMA is just one of many options, not their only lifeline. Their actions here are going to speak way louder than any press release ever could.
So, you see, the real battle here was never really about one phone call. It's about something much bigger. It's about who gets to define reality. Who gets to define what Canadian sovereignty actually looks like in a world where the old power structures are starting to change? It's a question that goes way beyond just these two countries.
Thank you for watching. We'll continue to track how this reshapes the future of politics. Like and subscribe to see more videos like this, and we'll see you in the next one.